The U.S. Unyielding appeared out of nowhere, its massive form emerging from a turbulent, newly discovered wormhole. Its sheer size alone was enough to stun the Hegaran fleet's sensors as it slowly cruised into their space, an imposing silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. To the sophisticated Hegaran commanders, the human ship was a relic, its design crude compared to their sleek, hyper-advanced vessels. But the Unyielding had one thing that the Hegaran ships lacked: unpredictability. The first warning came only minutes before the attack. The Hegaran sensors detected an anomaly, an energy fluctuation that was unlike anything they had ever observed. Before they could analyze further, the ship fired. A single pulse, invisible to the naked eye, tore through a Hegaran scout ship in seconds, reducing it to floating debris. The explosion sent shockwaves across the command center on Hegaran Command, triggering alarms and urgent dispatches. They thought it was a mistake, a malfunction, but the Unyielding wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. Within moments, a Hegaran battle fleet consisting of 5 advanced warships was dispatched. They assumed the battle would be over quickly. A show of force would surely make the humans retreat. What they hadn't accounted for was the sheer audacity of the human vessel. The Unyielding didn't flee. It didn't even move aggressively. Instead, it allowed the Hegaran fleet to approach, waiting for them to draw closer, analyzing the movements. Then, when the fleet was within range, it unleashed hell. A barrage of fire from its main cannon sliced through the Hegaran ships with brutal precision. The energy blasts pulsed out in erratic intervals, constantly changing frequency and direction, making it impossible for the Hegaran ships to predict or block them. For the Hegaran pilots, trained for years in intricate dogfights and complex tactics, the battle quickly turned into a nightmare. No matter how they maneuvered, the Unyielding adapted. Every evasive tactic they used was countered in real time, every feint outsmarted. The human ship didn't just react, it anticipated. The Hegaran commanders, once certain of their superiority, were helpless. One of the Hegaran ships attempted to go for a direct assault, launching a full-on barrage of plasma torpedoes at the Unyielding's exposed side. The result: the torpedoes detonated in midair as a series of smaller human vessels, almost invisible, shot out from the Unyielding's hangars and intercepted the projectiles with unnerving accuracy. The human tactics were nothing short of genius, using small, agile ships to neutralize what should have been a fatal strike. The Hegaran flagship, Aelarian's Wrath, retaliated with its full arsenal, firing relentlessly at the human ship's shields. For a moment, it seemed as if the Unyielding would buckle under the attack. But then, in an unexpected twist, it fired a secondary energy beam. This beam, unlike any weapon known to the Hegaran, sliced through the shields of the Wrath and struck at its core systems. The flagship staggered, its systems faltering. With its shields down, it was an easy target for the final blow. The Unyielding's main cannon blasted through its armor, leaving nothing but debris. The remaining Hegaran ships, witnessing their fleet's total annihilation, scrambled to retreat. But the Unyielding did not pursue. Instead, it lingered in the void, silent and still, as if daring the Hegaran to make the next move. Within hours, word spread throughout the galaxy's farthest reaches. A single human warship had done what entire fleets could not. It had shattered the might of the Hegaran Empire in a matter of hours, and there was no sign that the Unyielding was finished. This was only the beginning. In the high command chambers of the Hegaran Empire, panic began to set in. How could this happen? A single human ship had crippled their most advanced fleet. This was no isolated incident. It was a harbinger of something far worse. The galaxy would need to act fast, or the rise of humanity would be their undoing. In the shadows of the emergency conference call, murmurs of fear grew louder. Humanity had just announced its presence, and they had made it clear that they weren't afraid to fight. As the dust settled over the ruins of the Hegaran fleet, the galaxy's collective sense of unease grew. The message sent by the U.S. Unyielding was unmistakable. Humanity was no longer a passive player in galactic politics. Their enemies had underestimated them. And now the galaxy would face the consequences. The Hegeran Empire, still reeling from the loss of several ships, scrambled to devise a countermeasure. General Xevri, their battle-hardened commander, was summoned to the Imperial War Council. His reputation as a strategic genius made him the only one capable of turning the tide. He studied the reports on the human ship with intense focus, trying to make sense of its unorthodox methods. The Unyielding's tactics had baffled even the most seasoned military minds in the galaxy. It didn't fight like anything they had encountered before. Xevri knew one thing. The human ship wasn't invincible. It was powerful, yes, but it had limits. If they could trap it, isolate it, and hit it with a concentrated strike from multiple angles, they could destroy it. He needed to buy time while they prepared the ultimate weapon, a multi-layered trap built around their most advanced warships. Across the galaxy, the Hegeran Empire moved with precision. Thousands of ships were mobilized, but their efforts were slow, fragmented. The galaxy's ruling factions, now aware of the human threat, had begun their own preparations. The Mechanar Dominion, a technologically superior race of androids, proposed an alliance, eager to eliminate what they saw as an unpredictable and dangerous new force. The Vornath, a race of psionics with deep control over the mind, offered their own expertise, manipulating human emotions and perception, aiming to destabilize them mentally. Captain Sarah Lawson, leader of the human force aboard the Unyielding, was not unaware of the growing threats around her, but she remained unshaken. The mission was clear. They were not here to conquer, but to defend humanity's right to exist. And if that meant destroying every empire in their way, so be it. Lawson ordered her ship to retreat from Hegeran space, knowing that they were too vulnerable in enemy territory. But the fleet was already in motion. In the dead of night, the Unyielding jumped into a new system, a place far from the Hegeran Empire's direct influence. They'd move in secret, gathering intelligence, forging alliances with rebel factions who had long been crushed by galactic overlords. But the moment they arrived, they were ambushed. A Hegeran task force, already aware of their retreat, intercepted them in a quiet nebula, a perfect place for a surprise strike. Xevri's fleet emerged from the gas clouds, firing volleys of plasma bursts and torpedoes. But the human ship was prepared. The Unyielding slipped through the assault like a shadow, its automated systems already calculating the most efficient counterattack. The Hegeran ships had barely any time to react. Captain Lawson's voice cut through the chaos. All fighters, scramble. Prepare to engage the enemy with full force. The Dreadnought's smaller support ships, compact yet ferocious, emerged from their docking bays like swarming hornets. They descended on the Hegeran task force, harassing their lines with rapid-fire lasers and unpredictable tactics. General Xevri watched the attack unfold, his frustration mounting. The Unyielding's resilience was uncanny. Every strike, every ambush was met with an uncanny ability to adapt. He had expected humanity to be a one-trick pony, a blunt instrument. Instead, they had proven to be a relentless and ever-evolving force. A worrisome thought began to creep into his mind. If this human ship was any indication, the rest of humanity could be far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The battle continued, but it was clear that the Hegeran forces were losing ground. The Unyielding and its smaller ships darted and weaved through the battlefield, always one step ahead. In the midst of the engagement, Lawson saw an opportunity. A Hegeran Dreadnought, caught off guard by one of their own traps, was now vulnerable. Target their engines, Lawson ordered. All power to forward cannons. With terrifying accuracy, the Unyielding fired a concentrated energy blast directly at the Hegeran Dreadnought's engines. The vessel faltered as its propulsion systems failed. Within seconds, the Dreadnought was in a freefall, a sitting target for the smaller human ships to finish off. As the remaining Hegeran forces retreated once again, Severi's frustration turned to dread. His communications with the High Command were filled with reports of defeat yet again. The Hegaran Empire was starting to understand the true scale of the threat, but the galaxy's rulers had underestimated the humanity they had dismissed for so long. With each battle, the humans proved that they could and would fight on their own terms. And as the Unyielding sailed silently into the void, Captain Lawson knew the war had only just begun. As the Unyielding continued its relentless advance through Hegaran space, whispers of its victories reached every corner of the galaxy. The once unified powers of the galaxy, each boasting unrivaled dominance over lesser races, were now divided by fear and uncertainty. The unthinkable had happened. A human vessel had obliterated a fleet and sent shockwaves across galactic politics. The galaxy's elites could no longer dismiss humanity as a primitive species. Now they had to confront the reality of an unprecedented threat. A massive holographic summit was convened. The most powerful leaders of the galaxy gathered in a tense and secretive virtual space. General Severi stood at the center of a vast council hall, flanked by representatives of the Mechanar Dominion, a cold and calculating race of androids, and the Vornath, psionics whose telepathic abilities were revered and feared throughout the galaxy. Each faction, once united in their desire to dominate lesser species, now found themselves on edge, fearful of what a single human ship could mean for their control. "We cannot afford to ignore this any longer," General Severi growled, his hands clenched in frustration. "The human vessel has destroyed everything we've thrown at it and more. If we don't act, we'll lose control of our territories." "I agree," came the cold, emotionless voice of the Mechanar representative, Counselor Talus. "Humanity's ship is unpredictable. We've studied its capabilities, but we have yet to comprehend its true power. If the rest of their fleet possesses even a fraction of that ingenuity, we could be facing a catastrophic threat to the entire galaxy." The Vornath leader, Haikshayan Sarath, was the next to speak. His face shimmered with telepathic waves, his eyes glowing with an eerie power. "Our psychics have tried probing their minds. We've seen flashes of determination, resolve, but we cannot understand them. There's something about their psyche that resists our intrusion. It's unnatural. Humanity's strength lies not just in their technology, but in their will." A ripple of discomfort ran through the room. The Vornath were unmatched in their mental abilities, but even they had failed to crack the mystery of human resilience. It was clear, this was no ordinary threat. "We must unite against them," General Severi said, slamming his fist onto the council table. "One ship, no matter how powerful, cannot represent the whole of humanity. If we launch a coordinated assault on their homeworld, we can break their resolve before they can build an army of ships." The Mechanar counselor's digital face flickered, clearly calculating. A direct assault on Earth would be risky, but not impossible. However, we must act with speed. The human fleet, while still small, is rapidly expanding. If we hesitate, we risk facing an entire armada. Zareth's voice cut through the rising tension, his tone full of ominous clarity. "Even if we destroy their fleet, we may not destroy their spirit. Humanity is unique in ways we cannot yet understand. We can break their ships, but we must understand their drive before we can fully conquer them." The discussion grew more heated, but one thing was clear. The decision was made. The galactic powers would wage war on humanity, not just with weapons, but with the goal of unraveling what made them so dangerous. Severi would lead the assault on Earth, while the Mechanar and Vornath would support in their own ways, coordinating fleets, setting traps, and working in the shadows to undermine human morale. But even as the summit came to a close, each leader felt a gnawing doubt. Would they succeed in subduing humanity, or were they opening a door to a conflict that would destroy them all? Back aboard the Unyielding, Captain Lawson watched the galactic summit unfold from the safety of her command room. Her fingers hovered over a series of encrypted communication lines, listening in on the assembly. It was clear that the galaxy's rulers had finally realized the full extent of humanity's potential. She smiled grimly. They were making a mistake. Humanity didn't fear them. They never had. And now, with the first victories in hand, Lawson knew the galaxy's rulers had made their first fatal error. They had underestimated the most dangerous thing humanity had to offer, its relentless will to survive. With the galaxy now united against them, Lawson issued a single command, her voice cold but resolute. Prepare for war. The rise of humanity had been anything but smooth. It was not through brute force alone that the unyielding had emerged as a symbol of strength, but through a history of perseverance, ingenuity, and relentless ambition. Captain Sarah Lawson often found herself reflecting on the journey that had led them here, knowing that their next steps would be just as pivotal. Hundreds of years earlier, humanity had been a fractured species, struggling against internal conflicts and external threats. Earth, though rich in resources, was constantly on the brink of destruction. Wars, plagues, and environmental disasters seemed endless. Yet even as the Earth teetered on the edge of collapse, humanity's spirit refused to die. They adapted. They fought. They rebuilt. At the dawn of the 22nd century, humanity's technological renaissance had begun, propelled by an insatiable thirst for exploration and discovery. The first great leap came with the successful launch of a warp drive, an engine that could tear through the fabric of space-time and allow humanity to explore the stars. It wasn't just technology that advanced, however. Humanity's drive to overcome every challenge began to shape their very culture. Unlike the galactic empires that had grown stagnant and bureaucratic, humanity fostered a spirit of innovation. There was no emperor to answer to, no elite council to restrain them. The greatest minds worked together to solve the impossible, often defying convention and tradition to do so. They learned from every mistake, every failure, improving their technology and tactics with each encounter. But it wasn't just their technology that made humanity dangerous. It was their adaptability. While the galaxy's ancient empires relied on strict, rigid doctrines, humanity thrived in chaos. A species born from conflict, they learned quickly that survival meant bending, changing, and rethinking everything. As the unyielding ventured deeper into galactic space, its history became intertwined with that of humanity's determination to break free from the chains of domination. It wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol, a culmination of centuries of hardship, progress, and unwavering belief in the value of human ingenuity. Captain Lawson, a woman forged in the fires of war and loss, had become its captain by merit, not bloodline. She was the embodiment of humanity's evolution. A child of Earth, raised in a world that had almost destroyed itself, but had found a way to rise from the ashes. She wasn't just an officer. She was a product of humanity's history, a leader forged by every struggle, every battle that had defined her people. Her personal journey mirrored humanity's collective one. She had been born in the ruins of a war-torn Earth, where survival meant outthinking and outlasting. Raised by a military family, Lawson had seen the worst that war could bring. But her drive to understand and overcome obstacles, be they political, technological, or emotional, made her more than a strategist. She understood what it meant to fight for survival, not for conquest. And she was not alone. Every member of her crew aboard the Unyielding was a product of this unyielding spirit, from the engineers who reverse-engineered alien tech to the pilots who had never given up, even in the darkest of times. Humanity's rise wasn't built on superior weapons alone. It was built on a relentless belief that they could always do more. And now, they had proven it to the galaxy. With every victory, humanity was growing bolder, more confident. The Unyielding wasn't merely an isolated threat. It was the first step in a new order, one where humanity would no longer hide in the shadows of the galaxy's ruling elites. They had taken their first steps into galactic politics, and no force in the universe could push them back. But Lawson knew that the coming days would not be easy. The galaxy's powers had finally united in opposition, and a full-scale war was inevitable. She had no illusions about the cost. But that was precisely what made humanity different from their would-be conquerors. They weren't afraid of the price they'd have to pay. With a deep breath, Lawson prepared for the next phase of the journey. She understood now, more than ever, that humanity's greatest asset wasn't its technology, nor its strategies. It was their resilience, their refusal to yield, no matter the odds. The galaxy would learn that humanity's fight for survival was just beginning, and they would be the ones to dictate the terms. The unyielding would lead the charge, but it was only the first wave in a war that would define the future of the stars. The first major battle between humanity and the galaxy's powers was set to unfold in the heart of the Vornath sector. It wasn't just a strategic location, it was symbolic. The Vornath, renowned for their psychic abilities, had long held sway over their territory through both mental dominance and a tightly controlled political structure. It was here that humanity's boldest move would take place. Captain Sarah Lawson stood on the bridge of the Unyielding, staring out at the swirling expanse of stars. Her mind was calculating, processing information from every angle. They were about to face the Vornath, a race that had long relied on mental manipulation to maintain control. Humanity's battle strategy was simple: adapt and counter every move, every advantage the Vornath believed they had. But it would not be easy. Her crew, ready and battle-hardened after months of skirmishes, was composed of the best humanity had to offer. In the heart of the Unyielding's command deck, Lieutenant Garrett Hayes, a former fighter pilot who had joined the crew after his family's destruction in a Vornath raid, stood next to the tactical display. "Captain, the Vornath fleets are moving into position. They're aware we're here." Lawson nodded, her eyes never leaving the shimmering display of holographic fleet movements. The Vornath might have believed they were prepared, but they hadn't seen the adaptability of human tactics on this scale. Humanity did not rely on tradition. They could innovate on the fly. The Unyielding had proven that. Now she would put it to the ultimate test. "They've underestimated us," Lawson said. "They think we're just an irregular blip in their galactic order. We're about to show them just how wrong they are." The Vornath had a clear advantage. They had the ability to manipulate the minds of those around them. Their psionic fields could cause disarray in even the most disciplined of soldiers, and their command structures were built upon this mental control. The Unyielding would need to be careful. They couldn't afford to engage in direct battle without first understanding how the Vornath would try to influence their crews. However, Lawson had already accounted for this. Before departing Earth, she had gathered a special group of human psionics, trained in counter-mental tactics, who would serve as shields against the Vornath's psychic influence. These men and women, though not as powerful as the Vornath, had been trained to block psychic attacks and turn them back on their assailants. Their presence would be crucial. "Prepare for the first strike," Lawson ordered, her voice calm yet steely. "Initiate the subspace jammer. We need to cut their communication links before they realize what's happening." The Unyielding's engines hummed to life as they moved deeper into the sector. A wall of human ships, small but highly maneuverable, spread out in a defensive formation. The Vornath, sensing the human fleet's approach, sent out a probe to make contact, trying to gauge their intentions. But it was a trap. The moment the Vornath fleet's psychic waves began to reach out, the counter-psionics on the Unyielding activated, blocking the Vornath's mental influence. The Vornath ships, unable to communicate effectively with their own forces, began to falter. The Unyielding's jamming technology further disabled their ability to coordinate and respond to attacks. The human fleet struck first, using hit-and-run tactics to disrupt Vornath warships before retreating into the nebula that enveloped the sector. The Vornath's typical confidence began to waver, as the human ships never remained in one position long enough for the enemy to strike effectively. "What is happening?" Vornath High-Cheyenne Xerath demanded as his fleet struggled to maintain cohesion. "Their tactics are erratic, unpredictable. We cannot anticipate their moves." Inside his mind, Xerath could sense that something far deeper was at play. The humans weren't just attacking. They were outthinking them. They were breaking their long-standing psychological dominance. Hizarath's focus wavered as the realization hit him. They had no idea how to combat humanity's resourcefulness. The humans weren't playing by their rules, and that was the greatest danger of all. Back aboard the Unyielding, Lawson felt a surge of grim satisfaction. This wasn't just a victory on the battlefield. It was a message. A message that no empire, no matter how advanced or powerful, could hold dominion over humanity. With every strike, with every ship that fell, they were proving their worth. The battle raged on, but humanity was no longer an underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Vornath would learn that they were far more than just a galaxy's worth of psionics, weapons, and empire. The human legacy had begun, and it was unstoppable. "Prepare for Phase 2, Lawson said. "We're just getting started." The Vornath sector was in chaos, and the human fleet had done what many in the galaxy thought impossible. They had broken the Vornath's mental control over their forces and decimated several warships. But Captain Lawson knew that this was only a temporary victory. The Vornath were not a race to surrender easily. They had their pride, and they would come back with a vengeance. The battle was not over. It was only beginning. Lawson stood in the heart of the Unyielding's command center, watching the battle unfold on the tactical display. The Vornath fleet had pulled back temporarily, but they were regrouping, preparing a new strategy. It was clear they had learned from their mistakes. Their psionic abilities were adapting, and their warships were now less reliant on communication, using more autonomous tactics. But humanity had adapted too. Every move the Vornath made, the humans responded with ruthless efficiency. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the Mechanar," Lieutenant Hayes reported, his voice cutting through the tense silence. The Mechanar Dominion had long been allies with the Vornath, but their alliance was now in jeopardy. After the humans' stunning victory, the Mechanar had begun to consider their own position. They're offering a ceasefire and an alliance. Lawson frowned. The Mechanar were calculating, always seeking the most logical path. If they were reaching out, it meant they were starting to fear the potential of human expansion. It was a strange irony that humanity's fiercest enemies were now looking for ways to avoid conflict. The message, however, had a catch. The Mechanar wanted a demonstration of human power, a guarantee that they wouldn't be left at the mercy of the human fleet. "Tell them we'll consider their offer. But first, we need to finish what we started," Lawson replied, her eyes narrowing. If the Mechanar wanted proof of humanity's strength, she would give it to them, but on her terms. The Unyielding's fleet moved quickly, now heading toward the heart of the Vornath stronghold. Lawson knew that striking at their capital world would send a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was no longer a fringe species. They were a force that could tear apart even the most powerful empires. However, the deeper they moved into Vornath space, the more dangerous things became. The Vornath would be expecting them, and they would have reinforcements. As the fleet neared the Vornath capital, the Unyielding sensors went haywire. A massive psychic wave surged toward them, and for the first time since the battle began, Lawson felt her resolve waver. The Vornath had mobilized their entire psychic core. It wasn't just a mental assault. It was a storm, a focused blast that could scramble the minds of entire crews. The Unyielding's countermeasures were effective, but even they had their limits. "Brace for impact," Lawson ordered, gripping the edge of her chair. She knew this would be their toughest challenge yet. The Vornath were willing to risk everything to stop them, and their power was formidable. The ship shuddered under the strain as the psychic pulse slammed against their shields, but Lawson had anticipated this. The pulse wasn't aimed directly at the Unyielding, but at the smaller support ships scattered around them. "What's the status of the fleet?" Lawson demanded. "Deploying countermeasures," Hayes replied. "We've activated the anti-psionic shields on the support ships. We should be able to minimize casualties, but it's going to be close." "Give me a path," Lawson said, her mind racing. She needed to turn the tide. Fast. If the Vornath took out the smaller ships, their chances of maintaining control would collapse. The tactical display flickered as the ship's AI had worked to navigate through the psychic storm. Path plotted, Hayes said. We can use the asteroid field ahead to mask our movements. It'll give us a chance to break through their blockade. Lawson nodded. Do it. Engage at maximum speed. The unyielding surged forward, racing through the asteroid field with precision, weaving through the massive rocks with an agility that belied its size. The Vornath fleet, still reeling from the initial psychic assault, had been slowed long enough for the human ships to break through. The tactical advantage shifted in their favor as the Vornath scrambled to regain control. We've broken through their blockade, Hayes shouted, his voice filled with relief. We're clear to engage their capital. Good, Lawson said, her expression hardening. Now, let's finish this. With the Unyielding's fleet scattered and the Vornath capital now vulnerable, the stage was set for the final strike. Lawson could feel the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just a victory. It was the turning point in a war that would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity had proved its might, and now the galaxy would be forced to recognize them as a legitimate power. The Unyielding moved into position, preparing for the strike that would define humanity's place in the stars. But in the back of Lawson's mind, one question lingered. Would this battle be the beginning of the end, or would it spark a war that would consume everything in its wake? The silence that followed the final push into the heart of the Vornath capital was heavy. The Unyielding had broken through the outer defenses, and now the stage was set for a showdown that could determine the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Captain Sarah Lawson stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the planet below. Its once pristine surface now a glittering mass of broken cities and shattered fleets. This was no longer just a battle, it was a reckoning. The Vornath had been forced into a desperate defense. Their once proud fleet, now diminished by the relentless onslaught from humanity's smaller, faster ships, was slowly retreating into defensive positions. But the capital world, Vornath Prime, was not just a military stronghold. It was a symbol of their power, their psionic supremacy. If humanity could break it, the galaxy's most powerful psionics would be brought to their knees. We've located their central psionic hub, Lieutenant Hayes reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. It's embedded deep within their capital city. Destroying it should sever their psychic link to the rest of their fleet. Lawson's fingers tightened on the armrest of her chair. The psychic storm that had lashed out at them earlier had been their first taste of the Vornath's true power. The Vornath were a formidable opponent, but they had underestimated the adaptability of humanity. They had tried to break the crew of the Unyielding with psychic waves, but their psychic influence had faltered against the humans' mental shields. They had tried to trap humanity within a web of fear and confusion, but the humans had fought back, unrelenting and resourceful. It was time to end it. Send in the strike teams, Lawson ordered. We take out that psionic hub, and the Vornath will lose their will to fight. Let's show them what happens when they mistake human resolve for weakness. On the surface of Vornath Prime, the assault began. Precision dropships descended into the heart of the capital, their engines roaring as they cut through the atmosphere. The strike teams, elite soldiers trained in covert operations, fanned out as they landed, quickly moving toward the massive, heavily protected structure housing the psionic hub. They were up against the Vornath's best defenders, warriors enhanced with psionic amplifiers, but the humans had learned how to counteract their powers. Meanwhile, above the planet, the Unyielding's fleet engaged what was left of the Vornath defense. The remaining warships tried to form a defensive perimeter around their planet, but it was futile. The human fleet was relentless, hammering at them from every angle, overwhelming the Vornath's coordination. Without their psionic guidance, the once cohesive fleet was now falling apart. Back in the command center, Lawson watched the battle unfold. The Vornath were throwing everything they had at humanity, but it was clear their forces were on the verge of collapse. Their once unshakable confidence was gone, replaced with fear and desperation. But even as victory loomed large, Lawson knew that this wasn't a simple conquest, it was a turning point. Humanity wasn't just fighting to defend itself. It was fighting to redefine the power dynamics of the galaxy. The actions of the unyielding were sending a message to every other empire. No longer would humanity cower in the shadows. They had risen, and they would never again bow to the will of those who thought themselves superior. "This is it," Hayes said, his eyes scanning the communications feed. "The psionic hub is down. The Vornath are losing their ability to coordinate. The fleet is in full retreat." Lawson allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The battle was almost won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was filled with empires, each one powerful in its own right, each one now faced with the undeniable truth. Humanity had arrived, and it would no longer be ignored. "Prepare the fleet for pursuit," Lawson ordered. "The Vornath may be broken, but others will come. We finish this now. We don't let them regroup. Humanity's message will be clear to the rest of the galaxy." The unyielding powered its engines forward, chasing down the remnants of the Vornath fleet, ensuring no survivors would escape. Lawson knew the galaxy would be watching, waiting to see what humanity would do next. This victory wasn't just about destroying an empire. It was about declaring that humanity's place in the stars was permanent. The galaxy would never be the same again. As the last Vornath ship fell, Lawson's eyes locked onto the display. The galaxy had just witnessed the birth of a new era. The question now was, would they rise to meet humanity on equal footing, or would they stand against them, knowing the price of defiance? The final remnants of the Vornath fleet had scattered into the void, their once proud vessels nothing more than drifting debris in the cold expanse of space. Captain Sarah Lawson stood on the bridge of the Unyielding, watching as the last echoes of the battle faded into the blackness. The psionic hub on Vornath Prime had been reduced to rubble, and with it, the will of an empire had shattered. For the first time since the beginning of this conflict, Lawson allowed herself to exhale, though the victory felt hollow. The Vornath had fallen, but the galaxy was still vast, and the challenges ahead were greater than any singular conflict. She knew this was just the beginning. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes's voice broke her thoughts. "We've received messages from the Mechanar. They're requesting a meeting." Lawson turned toward the display, where the cold, calculating face of the Mechanar counselor appeared on screen. "Counselor Tallis," she said, her tone even but with an underlying wariness. The Mechanar had been allies of the Vornath, but their political pragmatism could not be underestimated. They were not the type to simply accept defeat. They would seek to negotiate, to manipulate the tides of war in their favor. Tallis's mechanical voice came through, devoid of emotion. "Captain Lawson, we recognize your strength in this matter. The Vornath are no longer a threat, and we wish to discuss terms for a potential ceasefire and collaboration. We offer you an alliance, one that ensures your position in the galaxy, should you agree to refrain from further hostilities." Lawson's mind raced. She could hear the underlying calculation in Tallis's words. The Mechanar were not asking for peace out of goodwill. They were offering a lifeline. They had seen humanity's potential, and now they sought to harness it, rather than be consumed by it. "I'll consider your offer, Counselor," Lawson replied, her voice steady. "But let me be clear. Humanity will not be anyone's pawn. We have no interest in being used as a tool for anyone's agenda. If an alliance is to happen, it will be one of equals. There will be no master and no servant." Tallis's face flickered slightly, a brief moment of calculation before he responded. "Understood, Captain. We will await your decision." The transmission cut off, and the room fell into a tense silence. Lawson's crew was watching, sensing the weight of what was unfolding. The Mechanar had acknowledged humanity's strength, but there were no illusions. Alliances forged in fear were fragile. She knew that the galaxy's power structures were shifting, and they would be watching humanity's every move. How they responded now would echo throughout the stars. "Prepare the fleet," Lawson said, turning toward her officers. "We'll make our way to the Galactic Council's space. If the Mechanar think they can dictate terms to us, they're mistaken. Let them see firsthand what it means to challenge humanity. The Unyielding's engines hummed to life once again, this time heading not toward further destruction, but toward the heart of galactic politics. Lawson knew there would be others waiting, others who would seek to test humanity's resolve, to see if this newfound strength was nothing more than a fleeting moment. The question would be, who would step forward as humanity's true allies, and who would fall into the shadow of those who would try to dominate? As the ship cut through the stars, Lawson stood alone at the bridge's viewport, her reflection merging with the vastness of space. This was humanity's moment, not just a moment of survival, but of dominance. The galaxy had seen the Unyielding's power, and now they would learn something far more dangerous: the human spirit. The galaxy would no longer be ruled by ancient empires and forgotten legacies. It would be forged anew in humanity's image. And they would take their place, not as another empire, but as a force to be reckoned with, an undeniable presence in the stars. "Prepare to make history," Lawson muttered, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon. The dawn of a new order had arrived.